So you want to be an ESL teacher, you've looked online for a couple of job opportunities, you've gotten interviews scheduled. Here's how you can kill it on your ESL, EFL job interview. Hi, I'm Megan. I have been an EFL teacher in China for the past 10 years, so I've definitely been to my share of interviews, and my husband was also a recruiter for international teachers for 4 or 5 years. So I can give you perspective today from someone who's been to a lot of interviews, and I can also give you perspective from someone who has conducted interviews as to what bosses are looking for and how to really kill it in your EFL interview. Today, I have 7 tips for how you can do better in your ESL or EFL interview. Hopefully, these will help you nail the job. Now, before you even go to the interview, before you even hear the tips, make sure that you fit your country's requirements. For example, in China, if you want to be a legal EFL teacher, you need to have a bachelor's degree, a TOEFL certificate, a clear background check, and a passport from China's list of English-speaking countries. So just make sure that you meet all the requirements. That way you can make sure that you're going to have an interview with a reputable company. Now, let's get into the 7 tips for how to kill it in your EFL interview. Tip number 1, be excited. I know, this sounds simple, but this is the best piece of advice that I got when I went to my first interview, and it has proven true for all of my interviews. I feel like when you're interviewing for an ESL or an EFL job, yes, they definitely care about your qualifications, but I feel like they care more about your presence in the interview. Most companies and most schools are looking for someone who is very excited and very animated. They want someone who's going to be a good presence in the classroom, someone that the students will feel comfortable communicating with. Basically, they want you to be enthusiastic and approachable. Now, that does not mean that if that's not your personality, then you should change everything about who you are. I don't care if you're introverted or extroverted. I'm actually a little bit more introverted than you might guess right now by my level of animation. But when I go into a job interview, I know I have to dial it up a notch or 2 because that's what most bosses in schools are looking for. They're really looking for someone with a lot of confidence that can command the classroom and bring a lot of energy and life and fun into the classroom. If you're an extroverted person, lean on that strength. If you're not the most animated person, just remind yourself to dial it up a little bit more for the interview and you'll probably get a better reception. So smile a lot during the interview, use gestures, keep your voice animated. All of those things will really help you do better in the interview. Tip number 2, I would focus on your experience. If you have formal teaching experience, really draw on that, explain your experience to the other person, share a little bit about who you are as a teacher, what kind of things you did in class, what you liked to focus on. If you don't have formal experience, that's okay. Did you ever join a club? Did you ever help younger siblings with their homework? Were you ever involved in any volunteer work that had some kind of instruction or teaching? If you don't even have that, before you get this job, maybe that's something that you can do on the side to kind of build up your experience a little bit more. Basically, employers just want to see that you have a good personality and you have a little bit of experience with explaining things, working together with other people, that kind of thing. For me now, when I interview and I talk about my previous experience, I don't just say, I worked at this school, I taught this age group. I gave the employers a little bit more information about what type of teacher I was. So I talked about the types of classes I taught, but I also talked a little bit about my philosophy or my style. I would mention different assignments that we did during class or different activities that we would do, just to give them a little bit of a better understanding of my teaching style and my teaching methods. Along with that, point number 3 is to talk a little bit more about your teaching philosophy and what type of teacher you are or what type of teacher you want to be. If you already have experience, then you can share things that you have done in the past. And if you don't have experience, that's okay too, because you can talk about what you plan to do or what you hope to do. Like I said, they care about your qualifications, but they care much more about imagining the type of teacher you're going to be inside the classroom. So think about that. If you're standing in front of the classroom, what type of teacher are you and what is your purpose? If your goal is to make learning fun, then talk about that. Talk about the review games you want to do at the beginning of each class. Talk about the light-hearted conversations you want to have. Talk about the personal homework assignments that you hope to discuss with your students. If your goal is to make learning as practical as possible, then give a few examples of the topics you want to cover in class, how you want to talk about business vocabulary for Amazon selling, or how you want to talk about vocabulary words for traveling in another country. Give them a little bit of an idea of what you're passionate about with teaching. Even if you're not sure what that is yet, take a minute and think about it. What type of teacher do you want to be? What purpose do you want to have in the classroom? I have one friend who is really passionate about teaching students the basic skills that they need so that they can continue their language learning journey by themselves. He talked about that a ton in his interview, and that was one of the things that his employer said made them choose him over other candidates. He had a clear idea of what type of teacher he wanted to be, and he was able to articulate how he hoped to do that in the classroom. Once you're clear on who you want to be, connect your style and your personality to what the school is looking for. Now, to do this, you'll probably have to do a quick Google search to try to get a feel for the type of school or company you're going to be working at, but just find a way to connect your skills, your purpose, to what the school needs. If you're interviewing at an international school and you know that they're very focused on teaching kids culture or preparing students for studying abroad, then talk about the first-hand cultural experience that you're able to share with students. Talk about how you've lived in multiple parts of the UK and you can explain different areas of the country to students. Talk about how you can equip them and prepare them for going overseas. If you're going to be teaching adults professional business English, then talk about your professional experiences working at a company or working in an office. Talk about the types of skills that you're able to bring into the classroom, how you're able to explain to students how to write a professional email in a native way. Talk about the vocabulary that you're able to share from working in a real corporate office. For me, at my last interview, I knew the school was really focused on practical education. They really want to prepare their students for the workforce. And that happens to align with my philosophy of teaching as well. And when I went to the interview, I really emphasized that. I talked so much about how I didn't want students to waste time on other things that they weren't going to really use in their daily life. I don't want to just open up a textbook and have students read the textbook. I want my activities to be super actionable and super practical, and give a few examples of what that actually looks like in the class. So I talk about the fact that if we have an advertising chapter in the book, I make students write, direct, and edit a commercial for a product. I make students brainstorm and write the copy and make a poster advertisement. If we are talking about solving HR problems, I divide the class into different teams and I have them discuss how to best deal with a variety of HR situations. I matched my own ability and skills to exactly what the school is looking for. And if you're a boss and you see someone that has a good personality, has decent requirements, and seems to be able to help you accomplish your school's mission, why wouldn't you pick them? The rest of the tips are a little bit more narrow focused and a little bit more detail oriented. But for tip number 5, focus on the cultural environment you're going to be in. If you're going to be teaching in another country, talk about how excited you are to live in that culture. If you're familiar with the culture, that's even better because you can get really specific with the aspects of the culture that you are excited about. If you've never been to that country before or never visited that country, you can talk about the things that you're excited to experience, and that's okay as well. Now, one thing that helps is everyone loves to hear compliments about their home country or their home culture. So if you're talking to someone and you can show them an appreciation for their country and their culture, of course that's going to help you build that rapport between you and the interviewer. But also it can help the interviewer understand that you might be a good fit for the long haul. This definitely has not happened in every interview I've been in, but one interview I went to, the interviewer asked if I liked Chinese food and how often I ate Chinese food in a week. And I thought the question was so strange, but I later found out that the two people before me had only stayed in China for a year, which honestly is pretty common. A lot of people will just come for a gap year and leave. But in asking those questions, the interviewer was trying to decide if I was going to be another person who would just come and leave, or if I really enjoyed China and I was planning on staying for the long haul. So these questions can not only help you build a rapport between you and the interviewer, but maybe they would actually help you land the job as well. So being able to talk a little bit about the exciting parts of the culture you're going to be living in can definitely help. For point number 6, definitely be clear on the job description, specifically the type of students you are going to be teaching. Be very, very clear about their age. And if this is something that hasn't been clear in the job description, I would ask this question early on in the interview. Don't save this till the end if they ask, do you have any other questions? Because knowing the level or the age of the students can really help you tailor the interview to really fit the school's needs. If you are interviewing for a job at a kindergarten versus a job at a middle school versus a job at a company teaching adults business English, I would act differently and I would talk about different things in those interviews. If I were interviewing to be a kindergarten teacher, then the things that I would focus on are talking about how patient I am. I would try to give off an aura of being very kind and considerate and patient, very bright, but also very calm. If I'm going to teach middle schoolers, high schoolers, or college students, I would want to give off a more enthusiastic, youthful, animated type of vibe, and I would want to talk about things that maybe those students would be interested in. And if I'm teaching adults at a company talking about professional business terminology, then I'm going to want to act a little bit more traditionally professional, maybe a little bit more serious. So not only the way I act, but then also the things that I talk about. If I'm going to be teaching younger students, I'm really going to focus on the creativity of my lessons or the building blocks. Whereas if I'm teaching more college students or adults, I might focus more on simulated conversations, discussing, sharing more about culture. So knowing the level or the age group of the students will really, really help you. Knowing the English level of the students could also be helpful as well. If you're going to be teaching beginner students and you start talking about how you ask the students to film and edit a commercial for a product, the interviewer is going to see a disconnect. And so tailoring the type of experiences you talk about and even tailoring how you act in the interview can really help you fit the role better. And finally, tip number 7 is be ready for specific questions or be ready to give a demo lesson. To be honest, demo lessons are super, super common. And if you're interested in hearing tips about how to ace your demo lesson, I can always make another video about that. Just leave that in the comments down below or like this video and I'll know to make that. But also be ready to answer some specific questions. A lot of interviewers today, they didn't do this in the past, but a lot of interviewers today will ask very specific questions about a situation to find out how you would handle this. They might ask something like, what do you do if you notice a student is not engaged in the lesson? Or what do you do if a student hasn't been handing in his homework? What do you do if you ask two students to work together and they refuse to work together? Or maybe they would ask you questions like, how would you explain a library to a student who doesn't know this vocabulary word? Or how do you correct a student's grammar when they continually say, he said this instead of she said this? Like I said, these types of questions are becoming more and more common. One, they want to see a little bit more about your style as a teacher, and two, they're trying to see your experience level. An inexperienced teacher will probably have a different answer from an experienced teacher. Now, if you are an inexperienced teacher, don't panic. This is not the most important part of the interview, but just be ready to be asked these types of questions. Take a minute to consider, okay, if a student is late to class, how would I respond to that? If a student is refusing to work with his partner, how would I respond to that? How would I describe something to someone who isn't familiar with the vocabulary words? Having a general idea of how to answer these types of questions will really, really help. And if you're an experienced teacher, just be aware they might ask you these types of questions. I've found it's best to give pretty short responses and also share the meaning behind it as well, the reason why you are doing something. For example, if two students are refusing to work together, I would first want to find out what the main problem is before I respond to the situation. So just knowing that they might ask you these questions might help you not get taken off guard. Those are the 7 tips. Before we go though, I did want to share one bonus tip. I didn't want to make it an 8th tip because I don't think it's that important, but I definitely wanted to mention it, and that is to brush up on some ESL, EFL terminology. There is something crazy about the ESL, EFL world, and they just love acronyms, abbreviations for everything. And I've often found that interviewers will slide a couple of these terms into the conversation to make sure I'm familiar with them. So they might say something like, what do you do if an ELL is struggling with past tense? ELL is an English language learner. Or they might say, how often do you use PBL in your lessons, which is project-based learning? So maybe just brush up on a few of those terms. That way you're not taken off guard. So those are my 7 tips for how to do well in an ESL, EFL interview. If you have any questions, just leave them in the box down below. You can also visit atlasteaching.com for tons of tips and ideas, more advice about how to land a job. And that's all for today. I'll see you next time.